Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Please check out the KCC Discord linked in the description down below. There you can talk to me and a whole bunch of KCC fans who hang out there on a regular basis. I look forward to seeing you there. Our first story today comes to us from ECD Muppet. Being an engineer is effing based when your management is incompetent. Let's jump right in. I'm a factory automation engineer with companies like Tesla on my resume. At my current factory job, shortly after I joined the company, I solved a problem that one of our processes had been having for literally the entire 20 years this factory has been standing. Because my specific educational focus in engineering school was centered around exactly the kind of problem this process was having. I had the permission from my direct supervisor and production management to implement the fix for this specific factory line. The other lines were running well enough without it that I didn't feel it was necessary to apply it across the factory. It was just this one line that ran like crap for whatever reason. So I fixed the problem I saw. I did this for about 6 months and managed to fix problems with literally dozens of different processes across the factory. All the while, I had no idea that there was a rule determined by our corporate engineering manager that all factory processes had to run on the same set of control parameters, and that we were forbidden from changing the parameters that I had been running around changing. I didn't know this was a rule, and I never thought to consider that it might be a rule, because it's an absolutely stupid rule. Because process controls are supposed to be tuned individually to the equipment they are controlling. Every piece of industrial hardware is slightly different, even when the equipment is ostensibly identical. Without getting too technical, things like electric motors have subtle variations in the windings that make them respond differently to current flowing through them. Heating units have slightly different thermal mass and other properties that make them heat up a little faster or slower. The automated controls for those processes have to use slightly different control parameters to account for these subtle differences in equipment. But apparently, this manager read about corporate standardization in a book somewhere and decided that every line across all of our factories needed to run the same controller constants. He had spent years in his own factory forcing his technicians to find a single set of parameters that worked across all his lines. Apparently, he managed to find a set of parameters that didn't cause the equipment to catch fire. So, in his infinite wisdom, he had spent the last 5 or 6 years shoving that mandate up the butt of all his technicians and subordinate engineers, so that he could report to his bosses that he had been putting the hammer down standardizing our processes. So, in his eyes, I was effing up the whole factory by tuning those controller constants to match the hardware they were running on. After trying to explain, that's not how any of this works, and getting about as far as that old lady in the commercial, I acquiesced to the manager's very explicit and stern demands to put everything back exactly the way it was supposed to be. I barely managed to avoid being fired on the spot by apologizing profusely for my mistake because I didn't realize that there was a standard in place. So when scrap and quality rejects at our factory doubled in a single week, and we lost about 70 hours of uptime because of jammed up processes at a cost of about $10,000 an hour in lost productivity, there was suddenly a big meeting demanded by corporate to come yell at us for costing the company about $2 million in 1 week between all the increased scrap and downtime. At that meeting, I explained exactly the changes that I had been making to the processes over the course of the previous 6 months. I had charts from our historian for every single process before I made my original changes, after I made the changes, and after I was compelled under the threat of losing my job to revert all the changes I made back to the original parameters. I got the opportunity to explain to that engineering manager's boss that homogenizing code and standardizing processes is a good idea on the whole, but that there are specific equipment parameters that need to be tuned individually for each process they are running on, and that these parameters often need to be retuned if something about the process changes in a way that affects the performance of that process, such as changes in materials or natural wear and tear on components. And I explained that while one factory was able to find a set of parameters that worked across all their lines without causing catastrophic failures, most of those lines were actually performing quite sluggishly, and I demonstrated using our own plant's data how similarly performing lines at our factory before my changes dramatically improved yield and uptime when the processes were tuned individually. The corporate engineer manager got fired, and I got 40% of my annual salary as a bonus this year, along with everyone at my plant getting maxed out bonuses because of how well the plant performed this year. Well, OP, I guess not all heroes wear capes. I mean, especially in a factory, because that could turn out pretty bad. Anyway, this story definitely hammers home the need to document everything you do while you're working. If you make a significant change to a process, make sure you document what that process was before, the change that you're making to that process and why, and what the results are afterwards as well. Because you never know when you're going to need that information to cover your own butt and stay safe in your job. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from the Black Company Wiki. Be nasty to ESL folks who inadvertently used violent language. Now you're stuck with Memo Cannon, Report Crusher, and Document Hunter. Let's jump right in. I've been sitting on this for some time because I'm still not sure if it precisely qualifies as malicious compliance. And also, it's specific enough to conceivably be traced to me. But I'm sufficiently distanced from these folks now, so here goes. I was a freelancer for a media company that maintains a database for their videos, photo galleries, other digital property, as well as a separate bit for contracts and the like. One of the clients who struck a deal with them to utilize their IP was represented by a woman with serious bullying issues. Let's call her Boomer. She was a Luddite and rarely seemed to understand anything that was being said on conference calls. So, I suppose to feel important, she acted like the grammar police and would interrupt her own boss's business partners and stakeholders in mid-speech if they said something slightly different than how she wanted to hear it. Sometimes she did this multiple times in a single call. The worst was when she abruptly corrected ESL folks, like the group from India or the project manager from Germany or the account rep from Hong Kong. Really, any stakeholders from any non-Anglophone country who were still learning English. But on top of the grammar policing, she had a special fixation on correcting violent words and phrases. Examples to follow. Now, this is something I would support to a degree, as I try to avoid that language myself when I have the presence of mind to do so. There have been fair-minded movements for years now, all basically calling for a reduction in this type of language. But Boomer never conducted herself in a way that was respectful of anyone about this. So for me, it's not about the nobility of someone's cause, it's about how you treat people. When someone casually said, "Shoot me a note," very common to hear, Boomer would interject, "Wait, why did you just say that?" You could hear a pin drop. The proverbial tumbleweed would roll through. It's hard to convey the total rudeness in a Reddit post, but this is tangible stuff. She would then pontificate briefly on why such phrases were unacceptable. And it's a shame we have not moved beyond this language. And then suddenly it was crickets again. Like we are supposed to go back to the topic at hand. Like she didn't just treat someone like scum for saying a very common phrase. It's such a disruption, and she never apologized a single time. The first few times this happened, people were stunned. People from all countries of origin and all age groups, the other boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the younger folks. This also extended to hunting-related words. The phrase, "shooting fish in a barrel," and harmless phrases like, "deer in the headlights." When anyone said this stuff, she acted like she was being given carte blanche to be an entitled bully with anger issues for 45 seconds. Even the group I worked for, who got regular royalty checks from her boss, hated this. When she wasn't pulling these stunts, she was silent except for terse, distracted, soulless replies, and only when absolutely necessary. So to understate it politely, she earned only negative feelings from everyone. This came to a head. It turned out that the company was helping with a lot of her syndication and sublicensing docs, and even cloud management free of charge. They did not have to do so, and it was not in the contract. This had been unofficially grandfathered for her by one of the senior sponsors, and only because Boomer was a Luddite. The operations guy who did some of this grunt work for her finally got insulted by one of Boomer's direct callouts. He said something like, "We need a dev who can hunt down the root cause," and she snapped as usual. So he categorically refused to do the work, meaning she would need to pay extra or get database access and do it herself like all the other clients. I saw a fun opportunity here and seized it. I volunteered to handle it for her myself until I could set her up with the necessary access, at which point she ultimately would use the same screens I use. She readily agreed, and this is where I think malicious compliance comes in. We made a customized interface for me to use, and then gave her access to it. They were technically the same screens I use. There was a Brazilian IT guy who hated her more than anyone, and a girl in the creative department who commiserated with our cause. I sold them on my little plan, and one evening, we made it happen. There was a duplicate web GUI that had been created for testing or something, but was now disused. We decided to grant her access to this GUI, not the production standard one, but with key verbiage and icons of violent language. We knew she'd hate perforating the entire thing. The quick access bar that follows when she scrolls has these 6 beauties. Report Crusher. This was the reporting system she would be using 24 times per week. The icon was a vise with paper getting smashed inside it. If you look closely enough, the paper had the tiniest frown. Document Hunter. Instead of just search, the icon was a bullseye getting hit with an arrow. Shoot us a note. Instead of just contact us, the icon was a speeding bullet with an innocuous chubby cheek smile and baby-like expression. Memo Cannon. This was my favorite little contribution to the whole thing. It was always just a broken link. It never did anything except take you to a unique 404 message page with a teensy little line art drawing of a deer with antlers, his tongue sticking out, slack-jawed, and X's over his eyes. I just thought Memo Cannon was the funniest phrase I had come up with, and we knew it would stare at her in the middle of her screen for the next few years. The icon was a squat little cannon with a sparking fuse. Troubleshooting instead of just help, but the 2 O's were crosshairs. Wiki Change Patrol. This was worthless since it just linked to a recent changes page for a wiki full of deprecated docs that nobody consulted. But the icon was a gendarme-looking guy smacking a huge baton into his palm. It also featured these gems. The cancel button for the reporting system said kill task instead of just cancel. We had a file deduping routine. We changed the text for that button to say got time to kill. She didn't have permissions to access this actual function, but she would be seeing this button each time she opened any document in the web viewer. There were a handful of spots where the IT guy put a splash of camouflage coloration. In the standard environment, these were all just dead spaces. He thought, I believe correctly, that camouflage would get her blood to boil. Before we granted her access to this wonderful Frankenstein, I permanently switched to the same environment GUI so that I could say honestly, yes, these are the same screens I use, which is what she agreed to. I hashed together a walkthrough in PDF that even a zombie could learn from using screen captures from the new interface, passed it along, and that was that. The fallout is a bit anticlimactic, but I never got any calls from Boomer directly with feedback that I could savor myself. This is because she lured some gullible student to do the grunt work for her in an unpaid gig. So where I thought I'd be cherishing the apoplectic response firsthand, I actually wound up liaising with a disinterested teenager. But eventually it did filter back to me secondhand that when Boomer finally saw the screen, she was really livid. She called the account manager and demanded changes. The account manager and anyone else we knew was liable to get a call from her had been prepped beforehand for this eventuality and had access to screen captures which backed up the idea that what she was seeing was the normal interface. Absolutely no changes whatsoever were made. Was anybody else thinking after this story that somebody so easily triggered couldn't even tell you that they were because they wouldn't ever use that word? You definitely know this person was just looking for things to argue about though. Even the word shoot means to move quickly or directly. It's in the dictionary. If coworker Karen tried to correct me when I said I'm going to shoot over to the store, I'd just say, okay, yeah, I'm totally gonna load myself into a cannon and fire it, propelling myself through the air and landing at or on the store, Karen. This next story comes to us from Royal Rose. If someone asks you for help, you need approval to help them. Okay, got it, boss. Let's jump right in. I work in a law firm as a legal assistant. My boss does not like me. No clue why, she just doesn't. I'm not unconvinced. The only reason I haven't been fired is because every attorney I support hardcore goes to bat for me. Now, one thing that infuriates me about their hiring process is they do not, in any way, shape, or form, inquire about computer skills. We are, I guess you could say, tech adjacent due to the type of law we practice. But I've also interviewed at many other firms who require a typing test and some sort of Microsoft literacy test. I've come to be known as a computer whiz kid. I'm not even that great. I'm really just good with Microsoft products. My middle and high school were obsessed with us having computer skills, so I was Microsoft certified at like 14 years old. And while a lot of knowledge base is gone, I still know my way around an Excel file. This is where I think my manager started to not like me. Within a month of me starting, I showed her up multiple times on how to do things, but this was all one-on-one training, not like I called her out in a meeting. She would show me how to do something, like say how to concatenate in Excel. I couldn't even tell you how she was doing it because it was so convoluted and cumbersome. I asked if I could show her how to do it properly, and she said yes, and then was stunned when I did it in 2 minutes versus the half-hour explanation she had given me. Edit. I phrased this badly. The convo went more like this. I've actually had to do concatenations a lot at a previous job. I did it a little bit different. Can I show you and get some feedback on if it would be okay to use, as I'm more comfortable doing it that way? This repeated itself with several other things, and finally I just stopped making suggestions because it became clear she didn't want to hear them. Cause why let someone help you become more efficient, right? As my attorneys spread my skills to the rest of the firm, I was starting to be asked to help with other people's tasks, so they were done quickly. Then other attorneys started telling their assistants to ask me for help. I never minded, as they always asked if I had time before just assuming I would help them. My manager caught wind of this and had a meeting with myself and HR that I was doing unsanctioned and unapproved training. Her words, not mine. I brought up that people come to me, I don't seek them out. And she said, but you need to run everything by me. I asked if I had to do that if it was a 30-second fix, and she said yes. Okay, you got it. So I did just that. Someone asked me for help fixing a document header. Hey manager, okay if I show so-and-so this? Someone asks me how to make Excel columns all the same size. Hi manager, am I okay to help? Get asked how I can make it so when I copy and paste, it's in the specific format. Manager, can I show them? And to cover my bases, I copied HR. Want to show I am abiding by the rules. Multiple times a day. I'll give her credit, she lasted almost a month, but I was PTO one week. I was then told I'm allowed to assist others with Microsoft products without running it by her. By now, I'm not asked nearly as much to help, mainly because my knowledge has spread, as I would never just do it for them. I would show them how to do whatever it was and send a follow-up email with the steps. She still isn't my biggest fan, but can't say I give a F. One of the best things you can do with coworkers if you're not an actual IT professional and providing that advice isn't your actual job, teach them how to use Google so they can find the answers themselves. Because if they spend 30 seconds actually Googling what they want to know, they might find the answer faster than it would take for you to make it to their desk. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.